Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, European Communication, Research and Education Association colleagues and participants. I am delighted to be here in this beautiful and historical place, La Térmica, to behalf of the Deanship of the Faculty of Communication Science, formally opening this year's ECREA Organizational and Strategic Communication Section. As usual, in previous events, ECREA maintains the purpose of this character as a forum for meeting and debate, to contribute to the exchange of ideas and experiences related on this occasion to corporate social responsibility and citizen activism in times of political disruption. As a member of the Dean Office, we are proud of this type of event is organized by professors from our faculty, reinforcing our firm commitment to research and internationalization. Not only we hosted a few months ago another meeting of ECREA, there are continuous conferences and scientific meetings that choose our faculty. Despite being a medium faculty, we are a power in the development of national and international R+D+I projects. In our offer of doctorates, we have one in particular together with the Faculty of Educational Science that connects with the line of work of ECREA, called Education and Social Communication. I call continue reviewing our commitment to science, but I think the program of the Congress is very interesting, and I don't want to steal more time from it. So, on behalf of the members of the Faculty of Communication Science, of the University of Málaga, of our Dean, Mrs. Inmaculada Postigo, and of the Dean Office team that I'm part of, we welcome you and hope you enjoy and take advantage of these 2 intense days that lie ahead. Thank you for your attention. I wish you all a tremendously successful Congress.
Thank you, Rocío. Well, after this presentation, I would like to say you welcome and good morning. Sorry for that we are delayed for a few minutes, so I don't want to take more time. Just I want to thank you, La Térmica, for having today us here. It's a very special, as Rocío said, for us, for locals and also for residents, because this place has a big history, and I invite you to discover this history and try to understand more how people from Málaga is. I'd like to thank you also the ECREA Organizacional and Strategic Communication section, all the colleagues that are here. Also, I want to thank you, the University of Málaga, for the support that gave us, and especially I would like to thank all these organizations that help us to be here and to organize the social activities, like the Fundación General, that they support the guide too, Evandro and his biodanza session tomorrow, that it will be a new discovery for many people here today, and also Beli Digital for the work that they have done with all the preparation part. And I don't want to forget to thank our keynotes, Miren and Oibi, that they make a great effort to be here today. So I don't want to take more time. Thank you for being here, any one of you, because I know that some of you are coming far from here, and yesterday we had some problems with flights and delays and all these things that used to happen. So thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy Málaga and you discover this nice city. And we are very happy today because we have sun outside, because last day was quite gray and windy, and today you can enjoy the light of Málaga. It's one of the things I like most of my city. So thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy Málaga and the conference and all the conversations that we are going to have these 2 days. So welcome and thank you. And now I want to thank Rocío for being here. She is having a big back pain, but she is here with us today to give you welcome. So thank you, Rocío.
Thank you.
And thank you, the Faculty of Communication, for the support they gave us. And I want to introduce our first session. our keynote, Miren Gutierrez. Please, Miren, come here with me. I think it's better. Do you prefer to use that or that one? Well, Miren Gutierrez comes from the University of Deusto in Spain. She is the director of the postgraduate program Data Analysis, Research and Communication and professor at the Communication faculty of the University of Deusto. She is also a research associate at the Overseas Development Institute in London and data active at the University of Amsterdam. She has a PhD on data activism and digital humanitarianism. Sorry, this is a very difficult word. She is going to talk today about the emergence of data-enabled activism, communications, businesses, and catalysts. Hope you enjoy her conference if we manage to start.
I think you can hear me, right? Thank you. Well, thanks are due from my side to the University of Málaga and La Térmica and Isabel Ruiz Mora, Dr. Isabel Ruiz Mora, who has invited me. I'm going to step up here. I'm going to talk about data activism. Where is it? Here. No, it's okay. Oh, no, sorry. Okay. While this starts, I hope my hair is not coming out. Okay, I'm going to talk about data activism and how data activists around the world are communicating complexity, communicating research, and also how their activities are facilitated and made possible by catalysts. Catalysts play a very key role, and this is one of my conclusions. I will arrive to that point at the end. Well, I am going to talk about the emergence of data activism. And this is based on a book that I'm publishing. It's not available yet, so don't worry. But it's a book that I'm publishing on data activism and social change that will come out in May with Palgrave Macmillan. And this presentation is based on that book and the research that supports it. I've gone in a spiraling way from the most peripheral issues towards the core center, the core issue, which is proactive data activism. Because there are two types of data activism, reactive and proactive. And I will tell you a little bit about it. And I'm going to go through some of the characteristics. I've gone, in my study, I've gone through 40 cases using empirical observation, 40 cases of data activism, proactive data activism, and some cases which I've been able to observe as a participant, because I'm also a practitioner. I am also a data activist. My field of interest is illegal fishing, and what I do is I look at big data on vessel activity. You know, it might sound a little bit crazy, but I look into how fishing vessels move around, looking at patterns and behaviors that can show some irregularities and illegalities. And I also look at the impacts of that on development issues. I've also used semi-structured interviews with 30 activists and experts and researchers around the world. And I have also used a case study based focus on the Usahidi platform. The Usahidi platform is a platform that is based on crowdsourced data, citizen data, that is used for digital humanitarianism. And I will tell you a little bit about it as well. I will also look at a few cases of data activist organizations, initiatives, so you have an idea of the range, the variety, the creativity that these cases exhibit. And also, with my last message, they are not possible without the catalysts. Who are these catalysts? Who are they? Well, they are foundations that are linked many times with corporations. So that's where the business side of my presentation comes about. These foundations are a key to make these cases of data activism possible. So you can see anything. It was working earlier. So as I said, I'm going to start now with my presentation. I went in a spiraling movement from looking at what big data are and aren't. And we know very well that big data are not neutral. They are not devoid of ideology. They are not devoid of biases or asymmetries and discrimination, right? So big data are not raw, as Gittelman has said in a book. So I also look at big data society. We are a society, as we all know, that is covered by a thick coat of connections, linking humans and machines through the Internet of Things. We are basically human antennae because we carry around these machines, these devices that connect us with the network. So this is the big data society. And in my study, I also go through what are the uses of the data infrastructure by different sectors. So how, for example, governments and intergovernmental agencies use the data infrastructure to provide us with better services, but also to spy on us, right? From the Snowden case, we know that we are being spied on a massive way. So governments use the big data infrastructure to also to profile people, groups, and to spy on us. And the private sector uses it in a massive way as well to provide us with better services, with better products, but also to put in place a marketing machinery that is very effective. It was never as effective as today because they can target us on an individual basis. They know what every one of us is doing. They know what everybody is interested in. They can target us not only individually, but simultaneously, comprehensively. They can interrogate the whole body, the whole universe, simultaneously at the same time, not only capturing data, but also analyzing in real time, which is amazing. So that's my spiral there. On over the data practices. So what other data practices are there? Well, in the journalist sector, for example, I also look at how they have pioneered in communicating data analysis. They have shown the way in visualizing data. They have been very good at coming up with interactive visualizations and also cartography as well. And others have followed suit. For example, Alberto Cairo, who is a guru of visualizations, was telling me that he was very surprised about how his book, Functional Art, was being used by mathematicians and by researchers, etc., and not only by journalists, which were the main or the first audience that he had in mind. So finally, I get there, uses by civil society, which is my interest, how people, organizations of the civil society use the data infrastructure. So in here I see two main ways in which the data infrastructure is being used: the reactive way and the proactive way. Reactive data activists are at the vanguard of the usage of the data infrastructure. They are reactive. I'm talking about hackers, civil hackers, and techies that are creating their own networks, their own structures outside the system to protect their interactions from snooping, from massive data gathering of governments and corporations. They are very elitist. I'm talking about a bunch of people. And their main objective is to protect their interactions. I'm not so interested about them. I'm more interested in how proactive data activists, which is the core issue here, use the data infrastructure to come up with diagnoses and solutions to social problems. So they are more interested in coming up with solutions, as I said. And we will see how. This is a sort of a definition that I'm offering of what proactive data activism is a social phenomenon that is different from other uses of the data infrastructure and also from other branches of activism, because it makes the data infrastructure and the datafication process, it places it at the center of what they do. That's what distinguishes these activists from other activists. And also it's socio-technical in nature, and it means taking action, mobilizing, collaborating, and communicating, organizing via software and data. It means a sort of new citizenship because it empowers people. An example is, for example, digital humanitarianism, and what the sort of thing that Usahidi does. It places people that are being hit by a disaster or a catastrophe of violence, it places them at the same table, at the decision-making table, together with experts, which is very empowering. So it places people, normal people, or ordinary people. I don't know, nobody's normal anymore, so it's complexity. Ordinary people at the same decision-making table with experts, which is extremely powerful. I have repeated twice, but I think it's very important. It also creates alternative digital public spheres. Habermas is back, So it creates these spaces to agree on things, but for action. That's the difference with the Habermasian classic bourgeois public sphere. These public spheres are created for action. And it's also very powerful because everybody in the public sphere is a participant. So all sorts of actors are placed at the table, at the decision-making table. It alters the way people engage with datafication. It enhances their data agency. And by doing that, it enhances their democratic agency. It's a sort of reversal of the data variance, what I was talking about earlier, governments and corporations. Also corporations collaborating in massive surveillance as well. As we learned from the Snowden papers, Verizon had provided information about its clients to the government without its clients' knowledge. So it's a sort of reversal of the datafication process. The people who are creating their own data on their own terms are the people themselves. And we will see a few cases. It's a novel politics of the quotidian. It makes the datafication part of your daily life. It expands your political agency as well, your political action. It enhances and makes it possible your monitorial citizenship, your obligation as a citizen to scrutinize what people in power are doing. So I've looked at this phenomenon from different perspectives. It's a new phenomenon, so there is no schools of data activism yet. I hope in the future, it could inspire maybe some of you here to create one. But you can look at it from different perspectives. And from critical theory, I would say it's a full-blown communicative action with analytical elements because it's based on data analysis, but also with hermeneutic elements because it interprets a situation from a political point of view, and also with critical elements because it's linked with our ambition, our aspiration for emancipation and freedom. From the perspective of journalism studies, it is very similar to three branches of journalism. The investigative journalism, because it's very analytical as well, although it's not the same. Investigative journalism is interested in exposing a truth, exposing something that someone wants to hide for some reason. So data activism does that sometimes and doesn't in other cases. But what they have in common is the analytical element. The advocacy journalism, it's very similar to advocacy journalism because it also takes a political stand on issues. And it's similar to citizen journalism because it places people at the forefront of production in very horizontal networks. From the point of view of alternative of citizens media, which are not the same, as you well know, it is also similar to this sort of media as well, because of these horizontal networks, these placing citizens at the forefront of production, changing the relationship of citizens with automatized data production, etc., collection. And from the international relations perspective, it also can create TANs, TANs, transnational action networks as well, working locally and globally at the same time, making the most out of the space of flows as Castells described it, which allows simultaneous activity to happen at the same simultaneously. And one example is digital humanitarianism, where you have three communities working together in the space of flows. On the ground, you have the conventional humanitarian workers. You also have victims, witnesses, and that are experiencing a crisis, a disaster, or whatever. And then you have digital humanitarians working all over the place, from remote locations, helping in the effort to assist the victims. So there's an example of how this works. Also, from social movement theory, they can look like these initiatives can look like social movements as well, for different reasons. If you look at authors, you could take concepts from different authors. For example, De La Porta and Diani's description of social movements. These initiatives generate network organizations, as these authors describe, that rely on actors that are not irreplaceable, that are extremely resilient, and they can adapt to the situation very quickly. They gather actors around shared beliefs and solidarity as well, like social movements, although they are not confrontational like social movements are, because then in this sphere you have different actors that can be described as insiders, outsiders, and beyonders. Insiders, in humanitarianism, you have to be an insider because you have to work with authorities most of the times to be able to assist victims on the ground. You cannot start pointing fingers at culprits, or you cannot sit and reflect on what the reason for the crisis was, right? So these are insiders. Outsiders, you have most campaigning organizations can be outsiders. They can work in collaboration with authorities, but they can also think about Greenpeace. They're most of the times outsiders because they're not allowed at the, they don't have a direct dialogue with the authority most of the times. So they have to fight for causes outside the communities. Sometimes, I mean, it's not always the case because campaigns are evolving things. They can start being an insider, people get upset, and then you have to get out of the community to start to continue fighting. And then you have beyonders, people who are not even in the system. I'm talking about reactive data activists, for example. They are beyonders. They don't even use the same infrastructures, platforms. They have their own system, communication systems. So, and also, there is Milan has talked about a Cars River movement, a movement that emerges when the situation allows it and goes invisible underground when the situation is not, it doesn't allow it. So they also look like that. I'm not going to go through this because I don't want to keep on talking. If you're interested, I will leave the presentation here. Some of the things that I wanted to say about data activist organizations is that they are very hybrid, extremely hybrid. Data activists can even say, I am a journalist, but then you realize that they do much more than that. They don't do journalism only. They train other people, they advocate, they mix repertoires of action, they all do all those sorts of things. And I will talk about real cases so you'll see what I'm talking about. So, catalysts, who are these guys? Well, based on the study that I did of 40 organizations and their attributes, I came up with 11 attributes. I looked at the attributes that were more frequent. I looked at the attributes that had correlations, in terms of what sort of attribute is more linked with other attributes. If you are this kind of activist, then you tend to do all these things, etc. And I came up with a classification of 4 types of data activists. The first one, the first group includes the skills transfers. These guys, what they do is they either transfer data skills. For example, I'm going to talk to you about data kind. Data kind identifies data scientists that are working in, and this is not, doesn't come from me, it comes from interviews with them. There might be data scientists and analysts that are working in the banking sector, and they get really bored with what they're doing. They want to devote their time to substantial social issues. So they give time and effort, they lend their brains pro bono to social organizations. Data kind, what it does is identify these data scientists and deploy them with social organizations. So this is a net data skills transfer for you. Then you have social science skill transfers. People who do, organizations who do just the opposite. They train data scientists, they transfer skills so they can work with social problems. Then you have other organizations that I have called matchmakers, because they place in the same room different actors from different communities, and they facilitate the dialogue, so data projects come about. A classic example, some of you may know, the Media Lab Prado, for example. That's that sort of thing. Places the same, different actors in the same room. And then you have people building the tools and the platforms and also the training, so data projects are possible. So those initiatives are all, I have called them all, skill transfers. Then you have the catalysts. Catalysts are organizations of all sizes and sectors, private sector, third sector, private sector, public sector, that facilitate and fund. These things cost money, as you know. So these people make it possible. Fund all the sorts of data projects and institutions, including skill transfers, other catalysts, producers of data journalism, and data activists. So this is the second group. The third group includes organizations of the civil society that are producing data journalism. Why? Well, an example is what's happening in Spain. News media organizations are fighting for survival, basically. And although you have lots of new organizations coming out of the crisis, small newsrooms, online, producing online content and all sorts of things, none of them is doing data journalism systematically, like in other countries. There are other factors. For example, we have a very young transparency law that gives access to data. So there are many factors that make it difficult for media organizations to do data journalism. So some civil society organizations are doing that instead. And by doing it, there is a statement, right? They're saying nobody else is doing this, so we have to. In fact, I'm talking about Civio, a Spanish organization that is doing just that, which was engaged in the campaign for a transparency law. So, and also one of the other people that I have interviewed, Marc Cabra, who you probably know, was telling me, well, I came from the United States thinking, I'm going to do data journalism. This is really, really fantastic. Then she got here, and she realized there was no data to work with. So she had to become an advocate, and she had to become involved in a campaign to get a law in place. So this is the third type of data activists. And finally, data activists themselves, most of them are engaged in geoactivism, which means using critical cartography, which is an amazing word. Critical cartography, which means different things for different authors, but it means like mapping the unmapped, places that are not on the map. For example, I'm going to talk to you about Usahidi, the deployment that they put in place for the Haiti earthquake in 2010. Parts of the Haiti were not on the map. So by putting them on the map, and that was not the objective of the deployment, but they did that. That was also a statement, right? There are places of this world that they're not interesting for anybody, but the people who live there. There's there are many, many, many initiatives that are doing that, charting the unchart, mapping the unmapped, or, for example, creating alternative narratives. For example, what they're doing in Indonesia with community drones. They're appropriating technology. Drones were created for military operations, and now people are using them to create their own maps. And it's an activity that is extremely disruptive because mapping and maps were the exclusive monopoly of the state a few years ago. Not long time ago, only the state could map things. Now people can do that. It's a common language. And people are creating their own narratives. They're saying, no, this part of the forest is not going to be sold to a corporation to do some drilling. This belonged to my community for decades, etc., etc. So this is a very simple map of the organizations that I'm going to talk about very, very briefly, and the catalysts that make them possible. So you have 4 foundations: Open Knowledge Foundations, Oak Foundation, Knight Foundation, Omedia Foundation, Network, and that's it. You have a bunch of organizations, of catalysts, funding data activist projects. These are the ones that I was referring to. The ICJ, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, Tactical Tech, CVO, DataKind, Code for Africa, USAHIRI. And they are colored in different colors because I want to highlight the fact that these initiatives are extremely varied. ICJ is a producer of data journalism. Tactical Tech and USAHIRI are data activists, although they do other stuff. And CVO, DataKind, and Code for Africa are skill transfers. None of them, or most of them, are not knit, a clear type, because they do other things. I'm going to go very, very quickly through them. You know the Paradise Papers. This is a producer of data journalism, the ICIJ, and I am including it as a data activist because they do stuff that journalists, the conventional journalists don't do. For example, they collaborate. Wow, I've been a journalist for a long, long time, and that's almost impossible. These guys put together a group of 95 media organizations to do this thing together, which is amazing. And that's another attribution of data activists. They collaborate a lot. Why? Problems are too complex or too big to tackle on your own. That's the first thing. And then the other thing is that data sets are too complex and too big to tackle on your own. Another thing that I did in my study is look at where these data come from. And I identified 5 ways in which you can get your hands on data, which is not easy, because most of the times public data are not open. If you think about it, it's amazing, because it's it's public. So it should be, by default, it should be open. But most of the time, it's not. So what do? These guys rely on whistleblowers. Whistleblowers is the easiest way to get your hands on data because it's someone else giving you the data, which doesn't mean that analyzing that data is easy. These guys had to get together a group of 95 organizations to do that. We are talking about 13.4 million documents. I don't know whether you've seen the movie The Post. They had to go through, it's about the Washington Post, which talks about the moment when the Post got the Pentagon Papers about the war in Vietnam, and they had to assemble a group of people to go through those documents. And we are talking about dozens of documents. Here we are talking about 13.4 million documents, which is amazing because the data infrastructure allows us now to go through all of them, and also to us, to interrogate the data sets as a whole in every question that you have, because the capacity that the big data infrastructure affords. Tactical Tech, it's another hybrid skill transfer dedicated to training, developing tools, transferring data skills, etc. One of the projects that they have put together is this trachography that I encourage you to explore it. You provide your information on devices, about your digital life, and they track the trackers. They tell you who's tracking you, okay? Another reversal of the data variance. CVO, I already talked about CVO. hybrid organization is a skill transfer, data activist organization dedicated to data skills, transferring data skills, generating platforms, creating and fostering data projects. They exist because most of the time journalists or news media organizations are not doing their job or can't do their jobs. So they do lots of journalism. For example, some of you may be familiar with this project. They were the first to tackle forest fires in a comprehensive manner, which is an amazing capacity of the data infrastructure. It allows you to have this macro perspective, look at everything at the same time, and look at trends and how things are evolving. So nobody had done that with forest fires before in Spain. You know, forest fires were tackled in a case-by-case basis. So this is a very, very useful. And other projects like El Indultómetro, looking at pardons, arbitrary pardons, look at how they have dropped in the past few years. When you look at things, you know, it's like, what is this kind of, okay, time is over, so I'm gonna go very quickly through the rest of the examples. Data kind, I have already talked about it. Data skills transfer, placing, deploying data scientists. These are the kinds of projects that they fund, that they facilitate. Code for Africa is also a very hybrid data skill transfer, also matchmaker. They also build tools. These are some of the projects. And Usahiri, the platform for digital humanitarianism. This is the deployment that changed the world of humanitarianism. This was a change of paradigm in humanitarianism because it integrated for the first time citizen data into how humanitarian situations are tackled. So some conclusions very quickly. Catalysts support a variety of communities, a variety of projects and institutions. If I had done that map of institutions with all the cases that I studied, you will see that the number of cases will grow, but the number of catalysts won't, because the same people are funding a variety of projects. So they're a small community. They are also filling gaps where commercial and governmental interest is not. Catalysts play a key role in sustaining and triggering these projects. There are more needs that they can deal with, and it's not cosmetic corporate social responsibility. This is about real people, real cases, and real solutions from a bottom up. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Miren, for this conference. Anyone in the room wants to make a question?
Or criticize me, it's no problem. Feel free.
Any volunteer? Any reflection? Well, I have one, just to break the ice. What do you think is the future of your research and your field of knowledge in Spain probably in 10 years, or we can say in Europe in general?
I don't have a magic wand or anything, but I think that it's going to become more popular. You know, the field of data activism and how people are using the data infrastructure, or looking at the politics of the data infrastructure and the datafication process. I think that in Spain we have a sort of still we are behind, or this is my impression. You might think otherwise. We are a little behind other countries in terms of scholarship. For example, I was telling to someone just now, to you right now, I was talking to my dean about how I am invited to a workshop about technopolitics, and he said, techno what? So it's still not there, not even in our circles. But, for example, I collaborate with the University of Amsterdam, and they have a whole research center dedicated to data activism. So I also look at how media cover these things. And they mostly talk about our private data. You know, some hacker in Russia is going to steal my data. Oh my God. So I'm not so worried about my data being stolen by a hacker in Russia, as much as I am worried about the government selling my data or transferring my data to someone else without my consent and knowledge. I'm more worried about that, to tell you the truth. You know, what's going on? We are being spied on. Our data is being harvested and analyzed in real time. And so it's very, very worrying. Where are we going? You know, where is this society going? So I think that this is going to be more in scholarship in the future, hopefully.
Any question?
Good morning, Evandro Oliveira. Thank you for the nice presentation. I have a question regarding the integration of those projects into real, let's say, old-fashioned NGOs. I'm talking about that especially because I also work with fishery, with Greenpeace, and one of the big challenges was also to make the global trace where the fish comes from and all these things. And actually, when you make a study or you do research on a subject, when you put the campaign out, 2 years later, the campaign is outdated, or you have the problem just coming someone else. You are familiar with what I mean. So how far are real NGOs or old-fashioned NGOs, I would call it that, being, or old school, whatever, adapting and absorbing this kind of intelligence and this kind of data into their daily work? Do you have information about that? Thank you.
Okay. This is very much the question. I've been Greenpeace Spain executive director, so I know what you're talking about. For example, with this project with Cibio, España en Llamas, the project on forest fires, I know that these guys went to Greenpeace and said, well, you produce a report every year on forest fires, why don't we do this together? And they say no. So I'm criticizing, I really admire Greenpeace, I am still with Greenpeace, some of my best friends are with Greenpeace, but they have to adapt, they have to evolve, otherwise they will start becoming, there are other people out there that are using ingenuity, using the data infrastructure in very creative ways. For example, Usahidi is an African company created in Kenya in 2008. Now everybody uses Usahidi. Everybody, an African technology. So everybody can do it with there are limitations, of course, there are obstacles, but the conventional, traditional NGOs have to adapt to this new changing landscape. Otherwise, they will start, becoming old and out of date. Yes, and with fisheries, I investigate illegal fishing. So as a practitioner, I do projects based on big data on illegal fishing, and I am also trying to work with Greenpeace because I think collaboration is key. Greenpeace is not going to finish illegal fishing on its own. That's what they have to understand as well, because some organizations don't collaborate easily. So that's another thing. They have to. We were tackling climate change, biodiversity loss. These are amazing, big problems. And these organizations won't do it on their own. They have to collaborate more. That's another thing. Sorry.
It's okay. Hi, I'm Ana Melo from the University of Minho in Portugal. And I have one that might be two questions, actually. The first question is, what can I do as a common citizen to use this power to my own interest? This is the first one. The other one is more focused on the fires. Actually, as you know, we had a huge problem with fires in Portugal this year. And apparently, there's been a boom of civil society associations, initiatives emerging from that catastrophe. I'm really interested to see how participatory communication is helping actually these communities. And my first impression, is just very exploratory, is that things boom and they disappear as fast as they start. So do you have a secret recipe for some more impact?
I wish
Thank
I
you.
did. But about the first question was?
The first is, what can I do as a citizen to use this to my own interest?
I told you about the 5 ways of getting data, right? The first one and easiest is whistleblowers. The second one is public data that is open, or for example, the projects that I'm engaged with as a researcher, they're based on public data, but it's data that is scattered around a myriad of registries. It's unstructured, it's not harmonized, it's easy to get, but very difficult to analyze. But it's out there, you can get it. The other way is crowdsourcing. You can crowdsource your data, right? Get the citizens to work for you. If you're able to seduce and persuade a community to work with a project. The fourth way is appropriation, and that's what I would advise you to do. There is, start with appropriating your own data. There is already software out there that allows you to access your own data that corporations, the people, the organizations, the companies that provide you with services use for them to make a profit. You can appropriate your own data, and I would also say start start exploring tools and talking to people, and if you don't do that, start being trained or in analyzing, obtaining, cleaning, visualizing data, and you'll see that it fits in your projects somehow. And about forest fires, yes, I've read this study about how people in Spain and probably in Portugal mobilize. They compare it with effervescent kind of mobilization, that we get emotional and enthusiastic about our issues very easily, but then sustaining that momentum is difficult. So communication is key, and collaboration as well. I mean, all these groups that are emerging out of these problems and catastrophes, they should collaborate and look at long-term change and underline the underlying causes for what is behind these problems. And you will find also that it's very, very complex, because we are enduring a desertification process. Climate change is also having an impact on these things. Then, the speculation of land, land grabbing, schemes, that sort of thing. It's a very complex issue. But maybe exploring which are the main factors and looking at the long-term change can help focusing the campaign or engaging people in a more sustainable manner, maybe. But I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
Hi, congratulations for your presentation. It has a lot of data to process, but I was particularly interested in understanding social corporate responsibility part. I'm talking about private sector, and I was wondering how companies from the private sector participate in that activism. I think, first of all, as far as I can understand, we are talking about more controversial themes and how companies face those themes. And the other question is quite pragmatic. How do they operate? Because this panorama, it's very sophisticated for most companies. It means technology, and how do they do this? They have people dedicated to that activism. I was curious about this. Thank you.
Well, I'm no expert in, I wouldn't say the contrary, I'm no expert in corporate social responsibility. There are other experts here. But the role of corporates is represented by their foundations. You know, you see 4 foundations funding all these projects, and it's very complex, as you say, because they might be funding projects that go, for example, that are dedicated to mitigate climate change. So it's very contradictory, right? Because they're making money out of the fossil fuel business, and then, you know, they're getting massive benefits and devoting a tiny amount of money to mitigation projects, for example. So it's contradictory, and I don't know how they deal with these contradictions. Some of you are going to talk about that, so I will be listening. So yes, for example, in the United States, most of the catalysts that I was talking about come from the United States, where philanthropy has a tradition, you know, decades, a decades-long tradition. When you look at Spain, for example, then you find that the situation is not very similar. CBO, for example, is funded by the Open Knowledge Foundation. You know, so you get European data activists being funded by US foundations and that sort of thing. Why? Because tradition, the philanthropy is not, for many reasons, right? Philanthropy is not the thing here. You have some Spanish foundations, like, for example, Telefónica Foundation. I think what they have, the strategy that they have is to collaborate with projects that are really commendable. For example, the Telefónica Foundation funds some projects that are facilitated by the UN. The UN has a program that is called UN Pulse, and through that program, they fund some technology-based initiatives. So there is no contradiction, right? And some of these projects have they rely heavily on mobile technologies, right? So it's coherent in a way. Although I have to say, I didn't have the time, but there is a lot of criticism about some of these very fantastic projects, because they rely on corporate technology very heavily. For example, Code for Africa say explicitly, I'm not going to invent the wheel. I will use technology that is there in an innovative way. And so they use mobile technology in spite of the fact that it's based on a business model that relies on slave work, in some cases, to obtain coltan, for example, in Africa. So there are lots of contradictions, and with corporate involvement, it's also something that, you know, corporations have to deal with as well. But they do it through their foundations that have other objectives. That's why they can make a distinction between what we do as a corporate company or a for-profit company and what we do as a charity, which is might be completely separate. I probably haven't answered to your question, but I'm sure that we will hear more on that during the course of the conference.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'm sure that you will feel the inspiration while we are having the coffee break. So please, we are going now to leave to the room 005. It's just here on the right. The restaurant gave us 15 minutes, so we can arrive later for the lunch, so we have 15 minutes, 20 minutes to have coffee. We will start late the next session, but I think that we need a coffee. And we are not under any pressure, so please feel relaxed. We come back in 20 minutes, okay, for the next panel. Remember that we have panel 1 here, 1.1, and 1.2 in room 002, okay? So see you later.
Thank you.
Yes. I started to think about how in the communication or in the PR circles for several years we've been talking about how it doesn't really make sense